Okay, hello and welcome to the second episode of Kendo Chat. This time we're streaming live via Twitch due to the problems we had with YouTube last time. So I'm giving Twitch another go. If you're watching this later, basically I'll be uploading it onto YouTube as well, so you will be able to catch it on YouTube also. So this is the second time we've done this Kendo Chat themed sort of stream. I think it's a good and a sort of successful method of streaming. It seems to be going quite well so far. Today's theme is going to be about kids Kendo. I've had loads of comments and questions about teaching Kendo to kids and how we should encourage kids in Kendo, that sort of thing. It's something that I'm very involved in myself in Japan too, so yeah, I'm very happy to be talking about that. Basically, sorry for just the video just going offline a second while I just adjust the camera there. Yeah, so I'm going to be giving you my sort of opinion on that first, and then I'll be taking questions from people that are live in the stream. So if you could just bear with me one quick second whilst I get everything set up. We want the camera in the lower left. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so basically, like I said, just to get things started. Now we're obviously messing around on Destiny here while I chat with this. So basically, the theme of this is going to be good morning to you as well. Thank you for your comment and welcome to the stream. Hope you're enjoying it. We're just getting started. So yeah, we're trying out Twitch. See how it goes with that. I'll be sort of messing around on Destiny in the background. My main focus though is concentrating on what we're talking about rather than the gameplay. So don't judge me too hard on the quality of my games. So yeah, basically just to recap, this is sort of a test to see how we do with Twitch, but the video will be going up on YouTube as well, so you can fire me questions and comments in the chat, which is up there on Twitch, and you can also you can tweet at me as well. I'm not sure if I'll be able to pick them up in real time, but you can tweet at me as well. It's at Andy Fisher Kendo, so give that a go too. So before we get into the sort of meat of the chat today, I think what I'd like to do is again just give you a little bit of an update on what's going on with the various things that you've probably been getting updates about if you're following me. Let me just adjust the sound here. Let's turn the game sound down a bit. So filmed the first couple of episodes of the Kendo show, something I'm really excited about. I'm really looking forward to getting back into bringing you guys video content via YouTube. So yeah, hired out the dojo, got the first couple of videos sort of filmed for that. That went really well. Kendo Star as well, the Borgu website that I'll be bringing to you guys. Got the tags for the new brand of Borgu, and they look really cool. Really happy with that. Dead already. So yeah, they're cool. I think I put a picture up, so do have a look at them. And yeah, I'm sort of working pretty hard to get everything to you guys as soon as I can. So do make sure you're sort of subscribed to all the channels and what have you, and following the Facebook pages and all that. All the links are sort of everywhere. I'm sure they're pretty easy for you guys to find. Hang on a sec, let me just find somebody. Basically, this Kendo Chat idea of a show is like I say, I've had a really good response to it so far. You guys seem to be enjoying it, which is really, really great. I've trying it at a different time this week, obviously, hopefully to make it a little bit more convenient for everybody. It's a little bit hard for me at the moment to set an exact schedule for how often I can bring this to you, because of everything that I've got going on. I'm moving house at the moment, and moving into my new place where I'll be running the new website from. I'm sort of in the middle of that, and as well I've got to go to Macedonia next week as well for the European Championships, so all sort of topsy-turvy really with what's going on, so it's a bit hard for me to set an exact schedule for you guys as to how often I can bring this to you. Oh dear, I just wasted my super there. All sorts going on here. So yeah, as soon as I get everything sorted though, I get back and settle down a bit, then I'll be certainly bringing you a more regular schedule. I'll decide what's going to be the best sort of time that I can bring this content to you, and when you guys might be able to sort of tune in. If you guys have got any sort of suggestions on that as well, you feel free to sort of fire it towards me. And the other thing is, I want to start a new sort of themed show, as it were, on here. That would be more like a kind of, I don't know if vlog's the right word, but via this channel where I can bring you sort of more informal updates on stuff. That's not necessarily me sort of playing games at the same time, but like I say, more like a vlog really, where I can sort of open up to you guys on a slightly more informal basis, without the sort of moniker of the sort of the Kendo show or Kendo star, that sort of thing. Oh, I'm doing terrible here, right at the bottom of the scoreboard. So today's topic is kids Kendo. Something really, really close to my heart, something very, very important to me. Something that I actually am very involved in here in Japan, especially as my daughter is also practicing Kendo, and I'm very much involved in her Kendo club. So I often sort of update Facebook about it, things like that, and I get lots of questions. I've got a couple of comments here. Looking forward to Kendo show. Loved all the AJB episodes. Thank you. I'm hoping it's going to be a really, really popular show, as AJB TV was. I'm really confident about it. I'm sure it's going to be really cool. So I've got a lot more freedom than I did before, so I can bring more to you more frequently, hopefully. So and about streaming the EKC, I absolutely have no idea whether they're going to be streaming that live or not. So sorry about that. I imagine they may though. So anyway, back to the sort of topic of the Kendo kids. Like I say, something that's very, very dear to me, and I think the first thing I'd need to sort of address about the situation itself is, how does kids Kendo differ in Japan, for example? Oh dear me. How does it differ in Japan to overseas? And I think what I'd like to start by doing is sort of giving a slight overview of how kids Kendo is basically interpreted over here in Japan. Obviously no two places are the same though, so what I'm saying is it's a bit of a generalization, but you know, for the most part I believe it rings true. I think the term kids Kendo could be a little bit vague. In Japan, I guess it relates to anybody who isn't considered, well, it's hard to say considered an adult, because in Japan lots of people don't consider adulthood to be anything below the age of 20, but I think in terms of Kendo, I would say it's probably up to high school students when people would still be considered oh, I missed him with every shot, still be considered children, for want of or juniors is probably a better term, youths. Most kids tend to start at primary school, probably in their first year of primary school, when they're about 6 or 7 years old. That wasn't the case with my daughter. I didn't let her start until she said she wanted to start, but I wanted her to get used to school life before she took on Kendo as well. So it wasn't until her second year of primary school that she started Kendo, but it's not always the oh dear me, it's not usually the case. Sometimes it's younger as well, 5 years old as well. We have kids starting. Excuse me while the video just disappears a second while I just move the camera to the where should we move it? I think the top right is going to be best, so just I'll carry on talking, but so yeah, basically the thing is about the kids Kendo, they probably, yeah, like I said, they start from being very, very small, and it goes up to them around 18, and that still counts as the bracket of kids Kendo. But what I'm personally involved in is oh, sorry, there we go. Back. What I'm personally involved in is primary school kids, because that's the age of my daughter. Something that I'm I'm sort of going there and doing that with her. So I think one of the biggest and most sort of obvious differences. Tiago, nice to see me stream. Thank you very much. Nice to have you here with me. Nice to be talking to you. I think one of the biggest differences between kids Kendo in Japan and probably overseas is that Kendo in Japan is generally not considered an activity that kids would do for fun or something that they would be doing for their own enjoyment. It's kind of considered part of a sort of extension of their education. Most kids don't necessarily start Kendo because they say, I want to do Kendo. Many of them start because their parents want them to do Kendo, so the parents force them into Kendo, for want of a better word. Force could be a little bit of a sort of a strong word for it, but you know, lots of kids, it's not necessarily them that said, well, I want to do Kendo, but rather the parents said, you know, you have to do Kendo because we want you to learn manners, respect, the sort of things that Kendo teaches. So from that, the parents' attitude towards the kids doing Kendo is somewhat different, I believe. Now, I'll be upfront now, I don't have a great deal of experience in dealing with kids Kendo outside of Japan, certainly not compared to how much I do have here in Japan, but from certainly what I've seen, the parents' attitude is quite different. The parents see the teacher as like almost in the same way they would see a school teacher, and he's there not to provide entertainment or enjoyment for the kids. Rather, he's there to provide them with, as I said, an education, and with that, the sort of attitude of the teacher is somewhat different, because the teacher as well has this strong sense of responsibility to provide that education that's been expected to the kids. So oh dear me. Now, obviously, not everywhere is the same, and granted, the place I have my daughter practicing at is a particularly serious. I don't know if serious is the right word. I'm sure everybody's practicing seriously, but you know, it's quite a competitive club, and it's somewhat traditional in its methods. And yeah, the sensei is very strict. And he's very sort of traditional in the way he teaches, and he doesn't let the kids get away with messing around, stuff like that. But basically, they have extremely hard practice. I think that's one thing as well that could be quite different, is the actual amount of practice that kids do. My daughter is not practicing as much as some other clubs practice, but still she's practicing 3 times a week for approximately 2.5 hours. Yeah, and that's, like I said, that's 3 times a week. So she's practicing a lot, whereas many places abroad, perhaps they only have practice once a week or possibly twice a week. Maybe they'll have 3 times a week, but I think that's more of the exception rather than the rule. Certainly from what I've heard. Of course, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but that's the sort of impression that I kind of have. Ooh, let's just kill this guy. So they've got that very long sort of 2.5 hour, 3 hour practice, and it's super hard. Yeah, I mean, you know, my daughter's 8 years old. Some of the kids are 6 years old, 7 years old, 9-year-old. They go up to in the sort of primary school club that she's in. They go up to being about 12 years old, up to being a sixth grade. And sorry, just to clarify, when I say primary school club, the club's nothing to do with the school. It's not a school club. In general, although it's, you know, in some cases a little bit different, in most cases the primary schools don't offer kendo activities. We've got here. Is this Naruto? No. I'm lucky enough to have 2 practices in my home dojo, 1 additional in a dojo nearby, and 1 to do Asageki eat with a friend, not each one. That's excellent. That's brilliant that you're getting to practice like that. So yeah, the primary school sort of dear me. The primary school kids are they have like it's a dojo basically. It's a private. It's not really the right word, but like it's an informal club, and it's like I say, it's not to do with the school, but essentially the 3 main levels of junior kendo in Japan is you have what would be called like a shonen dan, or well, that's the sort of primary school level club, and that's like a after school club where they'll hire or use the facilities of somewhere. Often they use a primary school's facilities, like a primary school's gymnasium, for example. That may often be the case, but they don't. The club itself is not necessarily attached or anything to do with or sponsored by the school. So, where are we at? Then the second level there is chugakko, so the junior high school. So that's 3 years after they graduate primary school, and that's where it's a little bit different, because the majority of their kendo activities at that age is part of what's called bukatsu, or the school extracurricular clubs. So that's where, from being junior high school students, the kids are practicing literally in a club that's attached to the school, and the teacher may be somebody who works for the school, as opposed to the junior, the primary school kids, whose teacher is usually a volunteer. And then that's extended onto onto high school after they leave the junior high school, of course. And it's a very similar pattern. They've got a school club, which is often taught usually by an employee of the school, sometimes by somebody else, but usually by some kind of school employee. Oh dear. Right at the bottom of the scoreboard there. And it's a sort of progression. They'll start in a primary school club like that, and then they'll go on to once they become chugakse, then because they're so busy with their schoolwork and practicing kendo as part of their school kendo club, they don't often have time to come back and practice at their original dojo. But it depends from case by case. Sometimes they tend to come back. Sometimes after they go to junior high, they've sort of stopped coming. So they kind of have this sort of situation where when they become a sixth year and it gets to April, which is the sort of start of the school start and end of the school year, all the sixth year kids from that dojo graduate the dojo, and are considered sort of then to leave the dojo and go on to the next step. So that's a little bit different. But going back to the idea of the young kids, the little kids, that's again inside itself sort of split. You have what's called Teigakunin and Kogakunin, so lower years and higher years, and it's usually around the fourth year level, 4th years and below, or maybe 3rd years and below, and 4th years and up. It's often split into two, but other times it's all together. It could be either. And like I say, they'll practice very hard, but because there's a very different attitude towards kendo in the first place for kids, most of the kids aren't going there from their own sort of willingness to learn kendo, but rather because it's part of in the same sort of way that they would go to school every day. They go in there because that's what they have to do. Nobody worries about quitting. Nobody worries, oh, how can we stop this kid quitting? Conversely, especially because there's so many people that know more about kendo, probably interested in kendo in Japan than there is in other places. If a kid starts saying, oh, well, I want to quit, and those parents say, oh, well, fine, quit, usually the kendo club is fine with that and would probably rather that they quit. And sometimes that happens. It's not that nobody quits and nobody's allowed to quit, but generally the teachers don't have to worry about, oh, how can we retain students? How can we stop these kids quitting? How can we keep their attention? How can we keep it interesting? Opposite to that, they're very strict to the kids in a way that's probably not appropriate, to be honest, for practices abroad, because the whole culture towards kendo is a lot different. So, it's not unusual for sensei to get very angry, shout very loud. Even I've seen sort of punishments where the kids got to sit in the corner, that sort of thing, or even during the practice, pushed on the ground, hit while they're on the ground, that sort of thing. If you don't know anything or understand anything about the culture of kids kendo here in Japan, it can look very extreme, and it can be, when I first saw it, I was a little bit taken aback. But it's sort of how it is, and there's as hard as it is to understand sometimes, there is a sort of reason behind it all, and that's I don't necessarily think it's the best way, but I don't necessarily think it's the wrong way either, because in Japan the whole education system is very different to how it is certainly from my home country. Things such as positive reinforcement is rare. It's unlikely, certainly in a Ken dojo, that sensei is going to say to you, oh, that was really good, well done, nice job, good job, that sort of thing. They tend to focus more on what you didn't do well, and if you did something well, then they won't say anything. So you can kind of expect it to be that if you did the things you did right are the things that you weren't told were wrong, which is a little bit difficult, but I think kids are sort of used to that a bit. And another thing that sort of, I guess, I found a little bit difficult at first, but came to understand a bit more, is that teachers tend to be a little bit more strict towards kids that show a lot of potential. So if there's a youngster that seems to be particularly good, then they'll be even stricter towards that child. And on the reverse of that, you know, although parents may see that as, oh, why are they picking on my kids, sort of thing, the reverse is that is, you know, once they understand that a little bit, you know, they kind of, lots of parents are happy that the kid's being that the kid's being sort of not targeted but singled out a little bit by the teacher, because it's a sign that the teacher recognises that child's potential. And another is the whole this sort of pushing over thing that happens a lot. The kid will come in for a cut, sensei will receive it here and maybe push on his or her neck here, and obviously little kid, maybe 7-8 years old, a little bit of a push like that and they go straight onto the floor. Oh, I wasn't even holding the controller there. And they go straight onto the floor, and when I first saw that, and I'm thinking, oh crikey, that's a little bit extreme, and then he won't let them get up, and you're thinking, oh crikey, you know, isn't this a little bit too much? But then after sort of speaking to some sensei a little bit about it and learning a bit more about it, it's the actual keiko itself is extremely physically demanding, and can be very long, lots of kakari-geiko, lots of repeated cuts over and over and over again. Sometimes the teacher will, if you watch it when they put them down on the floor, it's not like a power slam, you know what I mean? It's like you know, obviously the kid falls over. Well, then they keep them from getting up, and it allows them time. The kid at the time sort of really mentally under pressure because they're being pushed on the floor and they're not being allowed to stand up. So they start getting like this a bit, but it allows them time for their body to sort of rest a little bit. So the teacher's thinking about lots of different things while they're doing that, even if from the outside it looks very very extreme. So that's sort of how things go in my experience in Japan, which I believe, as I said, is a little bit different to abroad. I think overseas we have a much more I don't know if prioritize is the right word, but we have a much more how can I say, we have a better use of positive reinforcement. So when somebody does well, especially a child, you know, when they manage to do something well, we make sure we let them know they did well, and from that positive reinforcement, you know, the child knows to do that again, and continues to improve that way, which is very different to the Japanese method. Let's see if we can get him like that. So yeah, I think that's one aspect that's very, very different. I think as well we have because again, I can only really speak for my own country, and from what I've experienced in some other countries about where is it? About the way Kendo is approached, but we have a sort of reliance on not reliance, but we hope that the kids are going to stay with us and they're not going to soon quit, and we have to think about keeping their attention, making sure that Kendo is fun for them, so that they don't leave, because if they say they want to leave, then of course they've got the right to leave. And
heavy ammo available.
That's a sort of constant battle that we have, and that's not just with kids, right? That's with adult beginners too. So we have to think about how can we keep the child's interest, how can we make it fun or keep it interesting, and that's sort of something that we have to concentrate on, which in Japan they don't have to, and it's something that they can't really comprehend. If you went to a Japanese child sensei and say, okay, how can I make Kendo fun for my students? I think they'd be like, well, why do you want to make it fun? It's not a game. That's the sort of reaction you'd be likely to receive, because I'm not sure they'd fully understand the situation as it can be overseas. Obviously that doesn't go for everybody, but I'm sure there's lots of teachers that may sort of react in that way. With that comes a different approach towards teaching, and also a different approach from the parents in regards to how they view the teacher. I think many parents would probably be quite upset if Kendo teachers spoke to the children in the same way that some Japanese teachers, some teachers in Japan speak to their students, for example, and rightly so, because it's a different it's not just a different culture. They've come to Kendo in a different from a different point of view, which is totally fine. But it does mean that the sensei also has to consider that when they're teaching. Oh dear. I think starting age is probably a little bit older as well. Obviously, not for everybody, but lots of youngsters. I don't think there's as many kids starting overseas that are sort of 6 years old, 4, 5, 6 years old, whereas there are here. I think many kids probably start overseas once they turn sort of 10 or 11, something like that. Is from what I've sort of seen. So that's obviously a slightly different thing as well. It's not that kids that age don't start here. It's not everybody starts at 6 years old. Like I said, my daughter was 8 when she started. But it's still a little bit different. And also you've got the issue of insurance, haven't you? Overseas, where you have to think about what's an insurance company going to cover, what's it going to be, are we going to be able to get insurance to do this, and what sort of problems are we going to have if that happens, because Western or non-Japanese insurance companies might not understand Kendo in the same way that a Japanese insurance company would. So I'm sure that, I'm no expert on insurance, of course, but thinking about, we're going to take a bunch of 7, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, put them in armour and have them fight each other with sticks, then I can understand that may cause some sort of issues with finding insurance. I do think that's another big sort of difference. What have we got here? Andy, do I play with Y-invert? No, I don't. Maybe I should, looking at the way I'm playing. It's also about helping kids to understand enough in the early days, and things like okuri actually mean nothing to them. I agree completely. And that sort of leads me on, actually. That's perfect timing there, Deirdre. Thank you very much for that. That leads me on to the next sort of thing I wanted to talk about, which is what it's something that I'm often asked, is what should we be teaching kids? What things should we be prioritizing as the things that we should be making sure we get across to them? Excuse me, I'll just have a drink of water. And although we've got those massive differences between kids Kendo in Japan and kids Kendo overseas, my personal point of view is that the things that we should be trying to teach the kids, the things we should be trying to communicate to the kids, and the things that we should be trying to encourage the kids to benefit from Kendo are largely the same. Excuse me. Personally, I think the number one thing that we should be teaching kids straight away from the offset is from the get-go is manners, reiho. And that's the same for everybody. It's not just kids. Any beginner, first thing they should be learning is reiho. and the manners of Kendo, because Kendo begins and ends with day, as we all know, and I do believe that that's probably the most important aspect of Kendo and the biggest thing that that people can take from it. The thing about manners is it doesn't matter how skilled you are with a shinai, anybody can do Neho correctly if you try. So it's something that should be expected of everybody, and something I really do feel like we should be making sure is a top priority, to making sure that the kids are doing properly each and every time. And particularly in Japan, believe it or not, that's something that's very, very neglected. Lots of places in Japan, they focus on getting the kids to win matches, and they even, let the Deho fall by the wayside. And that's something that I personally very much disagree with. And the kids that I teach, I make sure that it doesn't matter I don't care how strong they are or how good they are at winning or this or that. If they can't enter the shiaijo properly, if they can't properly thank their opponent, or say onegai shimasu before the match, then that means nothing. So yeah, I think that's the thing from the first thing. And then secondly, correct basics is important. Correct footwork, very basic stuff. But it's a bit of a difficult thing for youngsters to comprehend. So the next thing that I think is also very important is to make sure that they're practicing with good spirit. And by that I mean loud voice, big strikes, and without holding back. So yeah, that's a very important aspect as well. What I don't think we should be trying to do too much is trying to expect the same of youngsters as we may expect from adults. Of course, they don't have the same. Oh dear. They don't have the same sort of ability to process as we do. So, I think we should keep it as simple as possible. Yeah, without sort of overloading them with information. For me, it's really about making sure that they've got correct manners and good spirit. That's the top points. And in terms of keeping their interest, one of the things that I would recommend is probably, especially for younger kids, is I'd make sure that it's sort of broken up, so there's time for breaks. If you've got a 1 hour practice or a 2 hour practice, they don't have to be practicing for that full 1 hour or that full 2 hours. I'd be keen to sort of give them 10 minutes of instruction and practice, give them a couple of minutes break, and then rinse and repeat until time's up. I think that's the way to sort of try and keep their attention. Obviously, it's going to depend on the individual child as well. I mean, you mustn't sort of paint them all with the same brush either. So yeah, what I'd like to sort of move on to from that is a little bit about how I personally approach practice with kids, because I practice with kids 3 times a week, and as I say, it's a very important part of my Kendo experience right now. So I'd like to sort of share my thoughts on how I approach Kendo with kids. Now, before I do that though, like I say, I'd like to sort of make it clear that I'm practicing here in Japan in a slightly different environment. So some of it may be appropriate for you guys, and some of it may just be totally irrelevant, but I'm going to have to leave that to you guys to decide, because I can't really make that decision for you. But just before I do that, I'll just get to these comments that have been coming in. I'll just try and see if I can shoot one of these guys first. Let's get, there we go. Basically, where are we? So let's have a look. I'm in a small place in a small Kendo community. It's difficult enough to get people in the beginners course. Kids tend to get mixed in the class. Unfortunately, they tend to leave because they're surrounded by adults. A friend of mine has the idea we should have a kids only class, and I think it's the right way to go. Kids need special needs and they need to be separated from adults. I totally agree. It's very difficult to teach kids as well as adults together, especially if you've got adult beginners and kids beginners mixed in together. I think that's something that you're really going to struggle with. Now, unfortunately, we don't all have the luxury of saying, okay, well, we've got these kids and we've got these adults, so let's separate them. So I understand it's a bit of a predicament because you may only have limited practice times per week, and running a separate kids class may be difficult. But I think if I was probably in that position, I think what I'd probably be trying to do is, even if I had to put them together, I think I'd be trying to treat them a little bit differently. So even if I'm teaching them the same thing, I'd probably put a few more breaks in for the little ones, just so that they can sort of be broken away from it a little bit. And so that they're not being overloaded with information, as it were. But part of it's a sort of problem of the situation, and there's you have to sort of do the best with what you got. So it's a bit tough right there. Same here. We still have very little young adults, kids that we're trying to gather some and introduce kids to that whole works out. I think it's important to realise the desired income for each person. Group kids will probably just want to have fun and stuff that needs to be a legitimate goal when planning the class. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true as well. I think a lot of kids come to Kendo with the idea of it's going to be fun, which is fine. But yeah, as you say, when you're planning the class as a teacher, you have to try and come up with an idea of how you're going to provide that sort of fun and interesting experience to them, whilst at the same time teaching them at least some of the elements of Kendo. Now, it's not like when they're at that age, it's not totally vital that they do really beautiful, perfect Kendo, right? I mean, what's important first of all is that they show up. And then after that is that they start to do something that sort of resembles Kendo. As they get bigger and they stick with Kendo, and that's the most important thing, keeping them to stick with Kendo. As they get bigger, then the rest of it will come, I believe. We have a separate kids group for a year. You'd be amazed how much real Kendo to do when there's a game or challenge. Yes, and I absolutely agree. I think that's a perfect example of how kids Kendo outside of Japan can be sort of approached in a more intelligent way without simply writing it off. I think lots of teachers that perhaps have taught Kendo to kids in Japan could easily just say, well, they're not practicing seriously, so they might as well not bother, sort of thing. But I really disagree with that. I really like the idea, like you say, of giving them sort of something a little bit interesting, a sort of game or activity that they're enjoying that in some way links to Kendo. And if you look at lots of other activities like football or soccer, as you might call it in your country, how that's taught. Often they use lots of instructors might use different types of games or activities to teach them certain skills. So without them even realizing they're actually learning something. So yeah, that's that's also a brilliant point. I love hearing your thoughts on this topic. I need a prospect to look into kids' class in future. Good. Kids Shiai is the worst. They just wail on each other and get really upset. It's also a nightmare to shimpan. Yeah, I've shimpaned quite a lot of kids Shiai. It's very difficult here because you have such a variance in level. Some kids are absolutely fantastic and they do brilliant Kendo and they just look like mini adults. And then they're really, really skilled. And then some, they're still not quite getting to grips with it. And they're in the same division, and there's just such a difference. And then sometimes you'll get two kids that are really, really good, and you'll have a really sort of high-paced sort of very enjoyable shiai, and then other times you'll have two kids that maybe have just started, stuff like that, and yeah, it can be quite hard to referee, but I do think it's an extremely important aspect of kids kendo, is shiai. I do think it's very important, and I do think it's necessary for the development, and that doesn't just go for kids. I think that's necessary for everybody's development in kendo. So but that's a topic for another day. At which stage do you think they're ready for Borgu? How do I know? I believe anybody, whether it's a kid or an adult, shouldn't be going into Borgu until they can do kirikaishi with Fumikomiyashi. If they can do kirikaishi with stamp, then I think it's okay for them to try wearing Borgu. Particularly with kids, I'd start off letting them wear the do and tare, then followed by the kote, and finally the men. And again, I'd introduce it in small parts. It wouldn't be like, right, from today you're wearing Borgu, throw the Borgu on them and make them do a full practice in Borgu, because they're not going to be able to do it. Instead, slowly introduce it, let them wear the do and tare, let them wear the kote, and then when they start wearing the men, just let them have it on for 10 minutes and then back to what they were doing before. Then next time you can do 15 minutes, back to what they were doing before. Next time, maybe 20, 25 minutes, and slowly increase the time until they're doing the full practice mainly in the Borgu. If you just throw the Borgu straight on them, they're gonna not really enjoy that. Plenty of downgrades here that still can't do kirikaishi. There's plenty of downgrades here that can't do kirikaishi too. So yeah, I hear where you're coming from there. So anyway, to sort of slightly move on in terms of how do I personally practice with kids. Now, again, to qualify this, I personally am practicing in a dojo right now in Kumamoto, Japan, and it's quite a serious dojo. It's somewhat traditional, and their methods are probably not totally appropriate for overseas students, but I do think that there's points that for example, if I was to go overseas and practice with children, there are parts of it that I would change and parts of it that I probably wouldn't change. Personally, I'm not the sort of angry type of teacher that there is lots of in Japan. First off, I think I'm scary enough for a lot of the kids. I'm this sort of huge white monster that is bigger than most of the other people in the room, and sort of doing kendo. And for their first couple of practices with me, when they first got to know me, I think that was a shock enough. So they didn't need me sort of screaming and shouting at them in a sort of angry way. So I don't tend to be the sort of teacher that scolds the kids in that sort of manner, with the possible exception of my own daughter, which again is probably only when she doesn't express what I would consider to be an acceptable level of manners. Perhaps she doesn't use a loud enough voice when she says "arigatou gozaimashita" or "onegai shimasu," or that sort of thing. And that's more because I'm her dad rather than and I want her to do that sort of thing properly, rather than necessarily just because I'm one of her kendo teachers. But even though I'm not the sort of teacher that's really angry and does a lot of shouting at the kids in that way, most of the kids that I practice with, usually, if I'm totally honest, they usually finish the keiko crying. I do have this sort of ability to make kids cry, which is kind of funny. And I'm certainly not going out my way to make kids cry. It's not something that's my intention. But at the same time, I am making sure that they complete the keiko, having used full spirit and having given everything. So, like I said, although I don't do the sort of angry teacher sort of thing that's ever so common here, I do not let them rest, and I do not let them sort of rest on the laurels, as it were. I don't cut them any slack, to be honest, and that's partly because the atmosphere of the dojo that I'm in. That's one of the things that, you know, it's considered to be something that they're there to train their spirit. So they have to use a loud voice. After making one attack, they have to make the next one straight away. I might block their first one, and I'll give them a little bit of a push so that they can bounce off it and give me a hikiwaza, and then maybe I'll still chase them and make them do another one after that. And yeah, it's very physically exhausting. I make sure that it's a very physically exhausting practice, but I'm also very careful to manage it properly as well, because I don't want anyone to get hurt. Of course, that's my top priority. But I also want it to be extremely beneficial for them as well. And you know, there's a point that when you have practice like that with a youngster, there comes a point where you can tell the difference between when they're really giving their all and when they're not. And then there comes a point where you can see, okay, they're at the limit now. This is as far as they should go, and this is where to stop. And it becomes very obvious. And that's where I stop. I give them a short breather whilst. And when I say that, I'm not like, okay, have a break. I give them verbal advice, whilst and let them stop practicing whilst I'm doing that, so that they can listen. And I might even give them a moment to calm down, especially if they're crying very heavily. They can't necessarily concentrate on what's being said to them, so I may give them a moment to calm down. A few words of encouragement. I don't know if it's because I'm a Westerner or not, but I do tend to give out positive feedback to the kids, and it seems to work well for them. So, you know, I'll stop them, give them a little tap on the head, a little pat on the head, and get them to calm down a bit. And then, before finishing, I'll then make them do a little bit more. I'll make them do just a short kakari geiko or something like that, just so that they've been brought to the very edge of their limits. They've been taken back a step and then pushed over it slightly again, just to really you know, sort of hammer home the point of not giving up and always to push yourself. And it works really, really well so far. And I've really seen brilliant benefits from it. It's not just me that's teaching these kids, but basically there's maybe 3 of us that are teaching these kids now, possibly 4 occasionally, that are teaching these kids, and we've all got very different styles, but that's my style. And the results of that as well, you know, we're seeing the kids have great results in Shiai. We just had one of the boys become the Kumamoto champion, for example, and one of the girls as well, actually. So, you know, they're doing great. The sort of program we've got going seems to be working. But more important than any of the results, what we are seeing more than anything is this sort of camaraderie between these kids. Like they're sort of building a bond with each other by going through and sort of going through this practice, this hard time together, and they're becoming closer, and it's a really beautiful thing to see. Yeah, I really do consider the current method that we're using as very successful. So that's sort of that. But having said that, I don't think that method is particularly appropriate abroad, because like I said, the sort of attitude from, I think, even here in Japan, some parents may feel a little bit uncomfortable with the way some kids are taught Kendo. So with that sort of level of how can I say, tiring practice, it can be difficult. But you know, if you don't have that sort of understanding from the parents, then yeah, it's not really going to go anywhere. And I think that's something to do with the culture of Kendo over here, as I said previously. I think if I was to practice with kids overseas, if I was to go overseas and practice with kids, I'd certainly make the overall encounter somewhat shorter. I think that would be a very important thing to do. And I'd probably step down the level of intensity as well, because I don't think it would be fair to expect them to be able to do the same level of endurance style training, as it were. But I think I would indeed though try and keep the overall goal of the keiko the same. Again, reiho, manners, to some extent correct basics, and more than anything, making sure that they're using full spirit. So yeah, just to sort of summarize those points, and then I'll get to the comments. I know they've been building up while I've been sort of chatting away. A couple of general points that I would also give for teaching kids is one thing that I think is extremely important, that's often overlooked, is when you talk to these kids, you have to get down to their level. Absolutely always crouch down, make sure that I'm on eye level with the kids, and I don't necessarily mean bending over like this. I literally crouch down so that our heads on the same level, so I'm not up from above talking down to them like some huge mountain of a foreigner, giving them the sort of dictating. Instead, I'll get down on their level, and I'll use basic language, but I try and speak in a kind way, and I like to use positive reinforcement, as well as pointing out the things that they're doing wrong. And another point I would say is making sure that you do know the limits of each child. Everybody's different, and you mustn't paint them all with the same brush. Or this kid's 7, this kid's 8, this kid's 9. Well, 9-year-old can do this and an 8-year-old can do that. It doesn't work like that. Each of the kids have their own specific needs. They have their own specific abilities, and that has to be really carefully taken into consideration. And then I think the last point is that even if you're a teacher, I think it's very easy for teachers to become lazy and not benefit from the practice oneself. It's not a case of just receiving for the kids. If I'm practicing with a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, or a 25-year-old, even if I'm just being motodachi and I'm opening, okay, hit men, or kote, and showing them those sort of opportunities, I'm making sure that my feet are in the correct position, that I'm practicing my own ashisabaki, my own taisabaki, my own kamae, whilst I'm facing them. And for example, I'll often, especially with some of the bigger kids, I'll make sure that when I make them do kakari geiko, I'll make sure that that's an exhausting practice for me also. Perhaps I'll also do some kakari geiko, so it's kind of an ai kakari geiko. I might even do that, for example. And then the last thing is, when I said about teaching basics, I have a sort of strict personal rule where I won't teach, how can I say, I don't like to teach defensive waza to kids. So although they need to know ojiwaza, especially if they're going to be doing shiai, but I try not to encourage them. I want to push the point that the kids have to attack from themselves. So if I'm receiving and we're doing jigeiko, let's say, and I open for men, I don't tend to let the child, and this is after they've been practicing a little while and they're in Bogu already, but I'll try not to let them oh dear I'll try not to let them just wait for me to open and hit. They have to, from themselves, take the initiative, step into range, and show that willingness to strike. So yeah, that's a little bit of a point as well that I think is very, very important, and that's universal. Well, I wonder if I can hit this guy. So yeah, I would say that that's a thing to take away from that. So yeah, that's been my sort of ramble on that. It has been very rambly, without sort of any clear direction. I'm sorry if it's been a little bit tough to follow. I hope it's sort of made some sense and been a little bit useful. Let me get to the comments, and I'll also start taking some questions for a little while as well. And we'll sort of go from there. I can have a look. Where did I pick up? A question, so it's been answered before. How did daughter start Kendo? Did you ask her, or did she become curious enough to start herself? Is she enjoying it enough to keep going without my intervention? Okay, the situation with my daughter in Kendo. I made a promise with my wife that I wouldn't force my daughter to do Kendo. And I have 2 daughters, and only one of them does Kendo, because only one of them came to me and asked if she could do Kendo. And she knows what Kendo is, because she's not only she's Japanese and has grown up in Japan, but she basically she's come through my Kendo journey together with me. From being a baby, she was present in the dojo. In fact, from being inside my wife's belly, she was still, when my wife was pregnant, we'd go to the dojo together, and obviously my wife wouldn't practice, but she'd come and accompany me to practice. So when I first off made this promise that I wouldn't force it on her, and when she came and asked me if she could do it, she first came and asked me when she was 6, and I told her to wait, because although other kids in her class were doing Kendo at school, I wasn't happy with her progress at school. And when I say progress at school, it's not that she was doing bad at school or anything, but in her first year at school, she had a lot of things to get used to. She's got lots of homework to do. She's got to do her preparation for the next school day, stuff like that. And I wanted her to be able to do that without problems before adding something extra like Kendo. So I held her off for a year until she was able to do that, and then I let her do it. But before allowing her to do it, I asked her if she still wanted to. She said yes, and I said, okay, well, the first thing you have to do, you have to come and we're going to go and watch. And I made a watch, and I made sure that she understood, and I said to her very clearly that Kendo has some points that are very fun and very enjoyable and make you feel very good, but there's also parts of Kendo that are very, very hard, very upsetting, very, very tiring, and points that even hurt. So we went to watch. Oh dear, we went to watch the club first, and as I said, it was quite a traditional club. So we got to see firsthand one of her actual classmates get sort of thrown across the dojo. Now, at that point, she said she still wanted to do it, so I allowed her to do it on the promise. I made her promise. I said, okay, you can do it, but you're only allowed to do it, and I'll only let you do it if you make this promise. And the promise is that after it starts to get hard, if you tell me you want to quit, I'm not going to let you quit. So, if you do, in a year's time, when you're actually in Borgu and you're having to do this really hard practice, I'm not going to accept it if you come to me saying you want to quit now. It's got a bit hard. And she agreed to that, and she did once tell me that she wanted to quit, and I told her that she couldn't. But other than that, I've asked her a few times, do you still want to quit? And generally she says no. She actually seems to be enjoying the Kendo experience overall, although it's very strict, and as it happens, her sensei is kind of singles her out quite a lot for the sort of special treatment in terms of the hard practice at the end of at the sort of end of Jigeko and stuff like that. But although it's hard, and although she has times that she gets very upset by it, really values what she's put into it so far, and also the friends that she's made. I think the biggest thing for her is she doesn't want to lose the friends that she's made, and she wants to join, go to Kendo together with them and go through that process with them. And I think that means an awful lot to her. And at 8 years old, I really respect that. And I think that Kendo has been a great benefit to her. So I don't really need to push her to go to Kendo or anything like that. We have this situation where, the other day, for example, as I said, sometimes I get a bit. I sometimes do get angry at her or tell her off when she doesn't express manners properly, and I did give her a bit of a telling off the other day because I wasn't satisfied with the way she said "arigatou gozaimasu" after a particular shiai, and I told her if she was gonna do it like that, then she should just quit Kendo, and she doesn't want to quit. She says that she refuses to quit. So I guess it's sort of working, which is kind of cool. So I hope that sort of answers it. It was a bit of a rambling answer. Let me see, where are we at? Kendo just brings out the sadistic side in all of us. Yeah, I had plenty of Keiko where I felt like crying out of frustration. But those are the best Keiko I've ever had at the same time. Absolutely, and me too. Absolutely the same, and I think it's the same for youngsters as well. Even kids, I think, sort of have that feeling also. So I do think that that's an important aspect of Kendo as well, that we need to sort of understand. This guy's getting away. So yeah, I do think that that's an absolutely brilliant point. That's very, very relevant and very appropriate. You got me. I think it's important to go through that sort of hell experience at some point in anyone's Kendo career. Yes, it absolutely has. It absolutely is. Nice one on that lad with the pistol. Yeah, I was lucky, I think. I went through 2 weeks of Kangekyo some years ago, and ever since then, any hard training felt like a breeze. Yeah, I've had that experience too. The problem with lots of adults is they stop at the spiritual barrier when they think they can't go on. However, there's still a long way to go after that. They only stop thinking and just continue to let their body take over. Yes, that's exactly true of anybody. It's very easy for us to think, oh no, that's enough now, right? I'm tired, I've had enough, I don't want to do anymore. You have to push through that. And for kids, that's why I think lots of Japanese training can seem a little bit over the top, because the kids do that as well. Yeah, kids get to a point where they don't feel like doing any more, and they sort of give up, and Sensei doesn't let them do that, and that's why the Keiko can get extremely tiring, shall we say. Andy, this has been really interesting. 2 a.m. here. Time for Belfast to check out. I hope we'll hear more from you on the Kids Kendo in the future. Many thanks. Thank you very much for joining us, Deirdre. I hope it was informative. I do hope that you enjoyed it. Sorry for keeping you up so late. Of course, the wife is always involved. Of course. Rambly is good. I'll be sure to watch this again on YouTube and take notes when I get to open our kids class. Good. I hope it's been useful. Like I say, again, it's all off the top of my head, and it's all a little bit. All a bit informal and like I say, rambly, but if it's useful to you guys, then that's all that matters. Thank you for the answer. Have a friend who started Kendo with his 9-year-old girl, 10-year-old boy, and they're still doing Kendo today. At the time, his principal was that he only asked them to come to training with him. What they do after that is up to them, and they of course end up joining in. Also, know a few Kendo crazy people who made their kids do Kendo, and unfortunately those are the ones that didn't stick around for long, barely making it to Q grades. Heard a story about Teramoto's early days when, as a kid, he begged his parents, who were poor, to buy a burger. His dad was reluctant until he said something like, I'll buy a burger if you promise to take it seriously. Worth it in the end. He's one of the nicest Kendoka I've ever met. Yeah, absolutely. Teramoto Sensei is wonderful. I really, really like him a lot. And yeah, I agree. I don't think that there's a massive benefit to forcing kids too hard into Kendo. It's something that happens a lot here, but you find that some kids take to Kendo, some kids like it, even though they didn't necessarily choose to take it on themselves. But what they get from it, they enjoy, so they like it. But then you have other kids that are clearly being totally forced into Kendo, and they, to be honest, they hate it. They hate every second that they're there. And those are the kids, to be honest, that they don't just soon give up. They basically they basically, even if they're not allowed to give up, they carry on going because the parents make them. They never get any better. They certainly don't get strong, or because becoming strong at Kendo, becoming not even just strong at Kendo, but in order to practice Kendo properly, I think you've got to really buy into it as a whole. So the kids that are clearly being pushed into it and are there because even though they don't want to be, they tend, even if they have some level of physical ability, they never do very well in tournaments, and they're not very popular with the other kids, and essentially it's just very clear that they don't want to be there. Many teachers just don't even bother teaching those kids very much because it's a waste of the time. So yeah, so that's that, I guess. Okay, well, it's been about an hour or so since I started broadcasting, so I'm going to close it for today. I've had a great time chatting with everybody. Thank you all for joining me, and for your great comments and questions as well. Like I said, I'm sorry it was a little bit of a sort of rambly type chat from me. It's the first time I've really properly done this in this format, so it's kind of new for me as well, but I think it went quite well. I hope, as I said, it was informative and enjoyable. It will be up on YouTube very, very soon. I'll be sending it right over to YouTube there, so you can watch it again, or you can share it with your friends, or on Facebook, or give it a like, comment, stuff like that. All those sort of things would be great. Don't forget as well, we've got the Kendo Show coming very, very soon. If you haven't subscribed to the Kendo Show yet, please get on and do that. We've filmed the first few episodes already, and they are going to be great. I'm so looking forward to getting those to you. And a couple of the first episodes are slightly relevant to some of the things we've talked about today as well. So I know you're going to absolutely love them. So yeah, get subscribed to the Kendo Show, and also Kendo Star as well, new burger shop that I've got coming. I'm so excited about that. There's a mailing list. If you haven't joined that, go to kendostar.com and sign up for the mailing list so that you can get the updates on that as well. And yeah, last thing is I've got a new series of videos that I'll be launching on this, not Twitch, but on the YouTube channel for Kendo Gamer. I haven't decided an actual title for it as yet, but it's going to be more of a sort of, I won't be actually gaming in it directly. I might chat a bit about games in it, but it's mainly going to be about some sort of Kendo chat that's more like a kind of vlog really from me, that isn't under the moniker of the Kendo Show or Kendo Star, that sort of thing. Instead, it's going to be just a kind of informal again ramble, but more of a vlog style, when I have some information that I want to get to you guys in general, that I think might be of interest. So yeah, I'll be bringing that to you soon as well. All of this stuff's going to come on a more regular, more how can I say, I sometimes forget English words, sorry, a more sturdy schedule after I come back from Macedonia, sort of in the middle of April. So sorry for the sort of sporadic uploads and updates and stuff like that. Do bear with me. I'll get a schedule nailed, and from sort of April, May time, hopefully we'll have this going regularly, and we can chat more often. So yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot for joining me today, and I'll see you elsewhere on the internet. All the best, guys. Thanks a lot.